Okay, Cappy, we have a real live wire today. Now I'm brimming to get into this. So we are. What do you know about this guy here, this libertarian socialist named JWeeds?
All right. So JWeeds is like you said, a socialist libertarian, right? An anarchist who is practically anti every single existing communist movement.
Yeah, every single AES movement and all of the pariah states that liberals hate, he also dislikes and decries as authoritarian, of course.
Yeah.
Because geopolitically, there's almost no difference between an anarchist and a liberal, as far as I can tell.
The more interesting thing about him is that his overarching worldview seems to be based on a conspiracy theory.
Several.
Yes.
The one that is probably closest to your heart or annoys you the most is the Moses Hess is a Nazi, created Nazism, Zionism, and communism.
Yeah, well, right. To me, when I was like reading this guy's book a little bit and listening to him speak, it seems like the majority of his positions are based in that, right? It's like he needed some sort of overarching conspiracy theory to somehow connect all the existing, quote unquote, authoritarian ideologies to one. And the link for that was Moses Hess.
Yeah, he is a central linchpin figure, and it seems to me like he sort of went in a buffet style, grabbed all of the political conspiracy theories, and that is what his worldview is based on. Christian conspiracy, evangelical conspiracism. He conflates the Jesuits with Zionism, with Nazism, with communism.
Yes.
All of the overarching isms of the last 200 years, he sees as sort of a malign machine created by malevolent figures behind the scenes in ways that mirror the protocols of Zion, right? He infers that at the First International, there was secret documents with Marx and his cohort, that Hess was the architect of it, bobbity-bobbity-bob. But to get into it, this is a random guy that we found scrolling on the FYP. In his background, it says JWeeds2028. He's running as for president as the Green Party. Let's go ahead and listen to this first one now.
From vanguard to gatekeeper, the Marxist monopoly on revolution. Marxism began as a monopoly. It was engineered that way. From the very start, Marx positioned himself as the author of the only legitimate doctrine. He didn't build consensus, he built a gate. He smeared anarchists like Proudhon and Bakunin, aligned with banking elites and Zionist racial pseudoscientists like Moses Hess, and helped design a centralized ideology to funnel all resistance into state command. By the time of the First International, Marx had already begun purging dissent. He didn't tolerate competing visions, he crushed them. The International Workingmen's Association wasn't destroyed by internal debate. It was hijacked, gutted, and discarded by Marx and his allies, who feared what real bottom-up revolution might unleash. What followed, history recorded as revolution. But what it became was a replacement. Anarchist movements had been the original engine of working class revolt. Mutualist, decentralized, anti-statist, and grounded in solidarity. But with the rise of Marxist-Leninist parties, the terms of struggle were rewritten. No longer was the enemy hierarchy. It was now rebranded as temporary centralism. The vanguard would liberate the people, they claimed, by seizing the state, consolidating power, and guiding the masses like children through scientific revolution. But scientific socialism became state religion, and the priesthood wore red. Once in power, Marxist regimes didn't just repress capitalists. They erased their own competition on the left. Anarchist unions were banned. Mutualist communes were liquidated. Syndicalist victories were rewritten as Marxist ones. The Bolsheviks didn't win the Russian Revolution. They silenced everyone else who had fought for it. The same playbook played out across the 20th century. Spain, Ukraine, Hungary, Korea, China. Wherever grassroots anti-authoritarian socialism emerged, Marxists either crushed it with tanks or suffocated it through absorption. The vanguard never meant empowerment, it meant monopoly. Even memory itself was rewritten. Spain's anarchist revolution, where millions of workers collectivized land, industry, and transportation without state oversight, was either erased from textbooks or reframed as a Marxist-led civil war. The Makhnovists in Ukraine, who fought both the whites and the Bolsheviks, were smeared as bandits and eliminated once their utility ran out. The Kronstadt sailors, once the pride of the revolution, were executed for demanding the very freedom they had bled to defend. The narrative was always the same. Anyone not under the Central Committee was an enemy of progress. Meanwhile, the Marxist academic machine went to work, especially in the West. Soviet historians, Western sympathizers, and liberal leftists canonized the myth that Marxism had always led the struggle. Names like Emma Goldman, Bonaventura Durruti, Lucy Parsons, and the CNT-FAI were relegated to footnotes if mentioned at all. The real history of working-class revolution was buried beneath a mountain of red-washed orthodoxy. Marx became gospel, the state became savior, and anarchism was rewritten as either failure or fantasy. It was essential to the ratchet. For the control system to work, there had to be a left that still believed in state power. Marxism, with its veneer of scientific inevitability and centralized discipline, was the perfect foil. It gave intellectuals and workers the illusion of rebellion while steering them straight back into the machinery of subjugation. The state remained intact, just painted red. And so, the gate was sealed. The vanguard was now the gatekeeper. Revolution became bureaucracy. Dissent became deviation. And the left became a mirror of the very systems it claimed to fight. But the original fire never went out. It was just hidden, deliberately, violently, systematically. And in what follows, we'll excavate the erasures, the buried movements, the suppressed victories, and the anarchist truths they tried to burn. Because before they redwashed the world, they had to burn the black flag.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important first to mention that this is obviously written by AI. I just hate that. Like it annoys the shit out of me.
I can't tell. I can't even tell anymore what is I don't know if I listen to enough, and I don't know. I can't tell if things are AI or not. I can tell that the only way that I could tell is when reading his book, he seems to cycle. Like every page and a half, it seems like he's sort of pasting out another paste out from the same prompt.
Yeah. Well, you see in the first paragraph how it says he didn't build consensus elongated dash. He built a gate. That's ChatGPT cadence. 100%.
Yeah. That is true. Yeah. I mean, he does have the, what's that called? The long M dash.
Which like a lot of people use, but it's how he uses them, and then things like that where, you know, I don't know, he didn't build consensus M dash, he built a gate is the same. That cadence, it just sticks out to me like a sore thumb.
Yeah. I guess that's true. Like, why didn't he go through and remove the M dash? There is a ton of M dashes in here. There's so many. There's so many. I'd never even noticed it until you said something.
Yeah. But this is goofy because it just, first of all, it makes claims that he doesn't extrapolate on a lot of his claims. He leaves them very vague. They're things that can't be substantiated, like to say, oh, Marx was scared of revolutions that were happening from the ground up. Like, according to what? You have to explain that a little bit more. You can't just say that. But
what do you think about his claims right here? The Bolsheviks didn't win the Russian Revolution. They silenced everyone else who fought it. And then what about the Spain, Ukraine, Hungary, Korea, China playbooks? What is about Spain? Is he talking about Catalonia?
Yeah, it's the CNTFAI.
Tell me like about that. Were they silenced?
Well, so here's the thing with the, which by the way, you know, the USSR what was funding the communists in that war. And you had many different factions. You had anarchist factions, you had Trotskyist factions, and then you had Marxist-Leninist factions. And at first they were all fighting together, but what ended up happening was, if I remember correctly, the anarchists did not want to. The communists were trying to get the anarchists to join like the Republic's army, like, right, which would be considered a bureaucratic, centralized military structure, right? The anarchists didn't want to do that. This led to fighting between anarchists and communists in the Spanish Civil War.
Okay. And basically he talks about the perversion of Marx, or them turning it into some like malign authoritarian movement, which doesn't take into account that Marxism is a methodology that changes over time, and through witnessing the collapse of the Paris Commune and subsequent to, is it Operation Barbarossa? Is that where like up to like, I don't even know, 12, 14, 18 different nation states like were doing operations in the USSR post-revolution?
What came to my mind was Gladio, right? The CIA, wasn't that like
that's like 1970s.
Okay, yeah. So we're talking. I don't know back then. I know that the reason why it's kind of a goofy complaint, because Marxism is not just arbitrarily authoritarian. You know what I mean? Marx didn't just decide, oh, you know, the workers need to use state power. Like, we had examples of why you need centralization in state power. And like you said, the Paris Commune was one of those. And then further into history, the more that capitalism became concentrated and centralized, and we entered the imperialist epoch, I couldn't imagine a revolution happening now that wasn't centralized, that wasn't authoritarian.
Right. So it's just anarchist nonsense is what he's talking about. Okay, but that's not why we're listening to him here today. Now, this one gets a little bit more to the meat of the matter. Let's go ahead and listen to this second one right now.
They want you to chase ghosts in the Caucasus. They want you hunting for Khazars, for Turks, for any ethnic boogeyman they can conjure to keep your eyes off the prize. It's the oldest trick in the book. When you're the one out pickpocketing and get caught, you point at a random man in the crowd and scream, thief, and watch the mob tear him apart while you slip out the back. The Khazarian mafia story is a lie, a decoy, a masterpiece of misdirection designed to do one thing, protect the Germanic heart of the beast. Let's be crystal clear. The origin of this conspiracy was not on the steppes of Central Asia. It was in the salons and universities of Berlin and Vienna. It was born from the same foul womb of German romanticism that vomited up the blood and soil mythology. The architects weren't Khazars. They were men like Moses Hess, Germans through and through, soaked in the racial pseudoscience of their time. They saw the world, and they saw a problem. Their new ideology of a master Aryan race needed a divine justification. They needed a story more ancient than their own fabricated myths. So what did they do? They didn't convert to Judaism. They didn't become Jews. They stole the identity. Like common thieves, they hijacked the Jewish diaspora, a people defined by faith and tradition, and crudely bolted it onto their racial framework. They created a new monster, a Jewish race. A white European race that could claim the biblical covenant while marching to the drum of German supremacy. This is the Crimson Con. It wasn't about Jewish liberation. It was about providing a divine mask for a white supremacist project. Zionism is not the heir to Abraham. It's the bastard child of German racial nationalism. Nazism and Zionism are not opposites. They are brothers from the same mother, European racial pseudoscience. One wanted a German Reich, the other wanted a Jewish state, but both were built on the foundation of ethnic purity, bloodlines, and the exclusion of anyone who didn't fit their racial mold. That's why they sterilized Ethiopian Jews and massacred Palestinians. They were purging the impure elements from their stolen racial identity. The banking cartels, the Warburgs, the Schiffs, the Rothschilds in their later incarnation were not Jewish bankers. They were the financial arm of this Germanic racial project. They funded the wars, they manipulated the markets, they financed the Bolsheviks and the fascists, all to burn down the old world and clear the ground for their new order. Their religion was power. Their god was the Germanic bloodline they saw as the apex of humanity. So when you hear the whispers about Khazars, you shut it down. You recognize it for what it is, a defensive maneuver by the real enemy. They are terrified of the truth. They are terrified that you will look past the decoy and see the Germanic face of the conspiracy. They are terrified you will realize that the entire Zionist project is a white supremacist castle built on the holy land of a stolen identity. We are not fighting a Jewish conspiracy. We are fighting a white supremacist conspiracy that wears a Jewish mask. And our first duty is to rip that mask off and expose the pale Germanic face beneath.
So it's very interesting what he's doing in that TikTok, Happy. So one of his key figures, Moses Hess, that he opines about more in the book as the architect of Zionism, Nazism, and communism, as sort of like the socialist utopian progenitor of communism and also Zionism.
Yeah.
He gets into a little bit of this, but it's very interesting what he's doing here because the Khazarian myth in and of itself is a conspiracy theory of sorts. It's sort of a cynical way to wave away the modern day Jewry is saying that they are like fake Jews or something. It's a little bit, but he's saying ignore that. That is also controlled opposition or a counter narrative supplied to you by the real puppeteers who are these Nazis who have taken the Jewish race and turned them, as he says, quote unquote, in another TikTok of his, quote unquote, into a banking race. So he sees modern Judaism as a banking race, as transmogrified from a religious Jewry or Torah Jews. I think he refers to them several times by people like Moses Hess and the Warbucks and the Rothschilds and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, there's. I mean, see, this is the thing too, because he claims to be just anti-Zionist, but to me, at least from my understanding, that's just anti-Semitism.
It's definitely a thing. If you went up and told a Jewish person that the modern Judaism is fake and that every Israeli and everybody who promotes Zionism only does so because they were carved out and made into a banking race by Nazis, they'd be like, "What are you saying?" They would just like blink at you. Right, it is, and I'm not the anti-Semitic soothsayer, but I imagine almost anything spoken bluntly, it has been conspiracized about regarding the Jewish people, right? So there are probably anti-Semitic conspiracies of every sort, and there are definitely some regarding the goals of Zionism, infiltration, Zog. We were just covering on the live stream a lot of the Zog, Goyim, Goy slop, normalization that's going on now.
What sticks out to me about this is he squeezed the Judeo-Bolshevik myth in here, which was a myth perpetrated by the Tsarist government sympathizers and Nazis during the time of the Soviet Union. So I thought that was interesting.
And a little bit. So, and it's also, so let's run through. So, okay. So this guy is a very manifold figure. So did we already cover how he's anti all the AES,
Yeah, we mentioned it. Yeah.
Okay. And that he's pro Rojava, of course, pro Zapatista, which is fine. He's anti PSL and Claudia de la Cruz. Did we mention that this time?
No.
Okay, so
No.
and he's also apparently he thinks that the PSL and Claudia de la Cruz is an Israeli proxy. And why is that? Who is this Singham figure we have in the notes?
So because in their live stream the other night when someone asked about the PSL, they brought up the People's Forum, and this is often talked about. The People's Forum is funded by someone named Neville Roy Singham, and Singham is a U.S. tech mogul, but they live in Shanghai, and they do a lot of business with the CPC. So like the West often claims Singham is like a propaganda, how could I put it? They think that he's like a propaganda agent for the Communist Party of China. But he funds the People's Forum. He's a socialist.
Right, but this guy thinks that China, by power of being a quote unquote authoritarian communist, is therefore engineered by the same Zionist puppeteers that did Nazism and communism.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that he had said was that Iran was led by the same elites as Israel. So I think to JWeeds, anyone in the quote unquote authoritarian axis is Zionist, is part of Israel.
Yeah, the six pariah, what is it, like Syria, Venezuela, Iran. Who else is in there? DPRK. He also said DPRK is run by elites.
See, what I would love to ask him to define elites.
Well, to him, it would be any authoritarian, and any authoritarian is secretly doing racial science. And this guy is a full crank, and we're going to get into it. I know we're sort of beating around the bush here, but I want to give him sort of a fair shake as far as his political views. He's called Venezuela authoritarian. He seems to be a Prodhanian or Bakunin, Kropotkin. He name drops Kropotkin that we've seen. He's in as much as he can be nailed down into what he likes, he advocates for something called mutualism, which I don't know about. Cappy, could you explain to me what mutualism is before we move on and talk about the fun stuff?
Sure, yeah. Mutualism, to keep it short, is just basically anarcho-market socialism with worker ownership of the means of production. They believe in a sort of socialistic system, but they don't preclude the free market. That's the short and sweet version of it.
Okay, so what does that, indulge me here. So what is that? I don't really have a shape for that in my head. Is there any example of mutualism anywhere other than like maybe the Zapatistas?
I wouldn't even consider the Zapatistas to be mutualist. I would consider them to be more of a collectivist variety.
Yeah.
I don't think mutualism has ever really existed. I think that this is just something, it exists in people's minds.
So it's like purely ideological utopian?
Yeah, it's purely theoretical. And in fact, yes, that's one of the things Marx criticized Proudhon for, was being utopian.
Okay, so we're going to get into this here. So I don't know when to implement this, but this guy basically thinks that Marx was funded by Jewry and banks and financiers and the Rothschilds. And apparently that is a very common viewpoint from Bakunin. Am I understanding this right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about this.
Yes, so Bakunin was very frustrated with Marx because Bakunin was in the First International and was I wouldn't say friends with Marx, but they worked together. They had very different ideas of how to build socialism, but they both at least agreed that that's what needed to be done, right? But there was a point where Bakunin had said, I'll quote it real quick. He said, "This may seem strange. What can there be in common between communism and the large banks? Oh, the communism of Marx seeks enormous centralization in the state, and where such exists, there must inevitably be a central state bank. And where such a bank exists, the parasitic Jewish nation, which speculates on the work of the people, will always find a way to prevail."
So Bakunin was not Jewish, I'm hearing, or
no, Bakunin was not.
Okay. I did not realize that Bakunin was that. I've seen that meme of Alex Jones, the Jew. You are a Jew. You are whatever. You are a pedophile. You are a pedophile. Jew. I've seen that meme, but I was like, wait, Bakunin is anti-Semitic?
Oh yeah.
I had never really encountered. This completely missed me. Maybe the Conquest, is that Kropotkin, the Conquest of Bread? I think I started reading that.
Kropotkin was the best anarchist. I'll give him credit where it's due. I loved Kropotkin, and I've read a whole collection of his works when I was an anarchist. The guy was not an anti-Semite by any means, and he was way more fair towards Marxism than the rest of these gentlemen.
Okay, so this guy, he seems to. So let's get into let's zoom out here a little bit. So on his live streams, he's a little bit more candid. This JWeeds guy. Okay, I learned that he learned to read at 16. And that he considered himself back in around 2009, 2010, around that era. He identified as a Christian. I'm guessing not Catholic, for reasons I'll explain here in a second. And that he has a lot of, right now I'll do it. He had a conspiracy radio program that they claim was bought out by Alex Jones, which is very interesting because Alex Jones also used to field a lot of accusations about crypto Jewry and the ethnicity of his wife, and him being co-opted and or what's it called when you get got to? Compromised. Yes, exactly. That Alex Jones was like compromised and those kind of things, which I think maybe, I don't know, maybe that's unrelated. I don't know. But this guy, interestingly enough, although seemingly being atheist now and saying, we'll get into his affinity for Islam later and why, this guy's very interesting. So
he is.
He was talking about, he has a lot of Jesuit conspiracies. Jesuits are sort of like the scholarly academic arm of the Vatican, right? The Jesuit conspiracies are very much from the evangelical Protestant point of view. They think that the Jesuits are behind like the USSR and the Illuminati and Freemasonry and things of that nature, and Vatican assassins. They see the Jesuits are sort of like the Illuminati for Protestants. So I think it's it is kind of interesting because I'm thinking that he started out as an anti-Jesuit guy, right? And then as he started to get politically pilled, right? But those are religious conspiracies, are sort of a different purview than political ones, right? So then as he started going into political conspiracies, one of the main political conspiracies are Jews running things, co-opted. So like the Catholic versus Jesuit thing is sort of in the religious. You don't hear a lot of like Jesuits run American politics, right? You don't really hear a lot of that unless you're an evangelical. That's when that pops up. However, when you start to get into the political sphere of conspiracism, who do you see? Zionists, Israeli, Zog.
Yeah.
You see Jews, bankers. So I'm guessing that this guy went down a Creature of Jekyll Island rabbit hole, started looking at like the Federal Reserve, Occupy Wall Street, the Tea Party, because it was about that era when he was doing conspiracy radio. And I would guess that of that time, he started sort of collecting like conspiracies about Jewish bankers and stuff like that. And then,
see, I was wondering this whole time. I've been like, how the fuck did this guy come to these positions? How did he become an anarchist? What was his political development like? But what you're saying makes sense.
Yeah, and then especially if as an American, so this guy he identifies as a libertarian socialist, which means when he takes the political compass, he's socially progressive, right? Which means he's like probably anti-big pharma. Right? Stuff like that.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anti-big business. And when you're in that sphere, you start playing loosey-goosey with anarchism and socialism and communism. But not unlike what we talked about before about how the path of least resistance makes you anti-Stalin because people don't have the courage of their convictions. And they don't want to, they're very much in the left lib sphere of American influence. They don't want to jump out and say, I like the authoritarian dictator. They don't want to own that equity, so they pussyfoot around and they look for ways to say what they want to say positionally by also decrying the top-down narratives that are bad about the said dictator that are pushed out by the State Department, i.e. in this case, like Stalin or Marx himself.
Well, yeah, what I thought was funny in that live stream we were in, he kept saying they lied to you about history. You can't believe any of these people. They lied to you about history. But then he went and he cited Robert Service, who is like a reactionary right-wing critic of the USSR. And it's like, wait, so everyone lied about history, but Robert Service totally wasn't lying about Stalin, right?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about what are some of the claims Robert Service. Is he just like an anti-Stalin guy?
I believe he wrote biographies about Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky. He hates all of them.
Okay.
It's just your average right-wing conservative fucking anti-communist.
So this guy has, in effect, a cobbled together religious conspiracies and political conspiracies. So in his overarching worldview, the Jesuits and the Zionists and the Nazis are all working together. He has made them sort of like, he has made Nazism, communism, and Zionism interchangeable masks that sort of like moneyed elites and bankers are using, except he adds another component here, which I don't know how you missed this. Did you see how excited I got in the chat? I was like, oh my God, he's a fucking Tartarian. This guy, this guy is basically, it's almost like finding out that they're flat earth or like a young earth creationist or something. Cause this guy believes, okay. So this guy believes that 3,200 years ago, we'll get into it. So he has all these things cobbled together, and then he has an alt history stuff added on. He also believes in phantom time hypothesis. He believes in a lot of alternate history, or the main push is this guy has a fear that he was taught things that were wrong in life. He was taught fiction about race science, and history, like the history, anthropological or archaeological history of the earth, which is very common with Christians, right? So I think that probably primed him up to have these ahistorical views, because, a lot of them are like young earth creationists. They think the earth is only 6,000 years old. When you add up all the begat in the lineage of like David or Abraham or whatever the hell it is, when you add up all that, you get a figure of about 6,000 years. So they say that's how old the earth is, which we can map out by the lifespans going back to Adam and Eve, right? So that's where,
so crazy.
That's where that figure comes from. So I think that a tacit or a sort of a little bit of buy into that sort of opens the door to believing that there are vast, gigantic lies about human history that were told. And this guy believes also in Tartaria. And it factors in because he sees, for him, the Jesuits were a dynastic family in Europe that used to be dark-skinned. He's mentioned that like 3 or 4 times, and I don't know quite.
That's so weird.
I don't know quite what he's talking about with that. He says that there are dark-skinned families and he seems to kind of clam up after he says it. Like he knows that it's kind of like a thin ice.
Yeah.
It's like a thin ice part of the conversation for him, but he saw previously the Jesuits were darker skinned. 3,200 years ago, there was 450 people in West Europe, in Europe proper, and about 1,300 or something total. I have it at the bottom of the notes somewhere. And that even if post a cataclysm, and we're talking like mud floods, ancient advanced civilization, the Tartarians, who had some sort of technology and or knowledge and or whatever, which I reference up here above, which I think he calls the green flame or the green quadrant. So he links pre-cataclysmic knowledge to his identity as a Green Party candidate, almost.
The green quadrant is the political spectrum thing.
Right, but he uses it.
That's so weird.
He uses it, and then he uses the green flame as well. But the thing is, he's using it. I'm inferring this, and this is just what I felt. This is like the poetic flourish I felt from reading a lot of conspiracy theorists. The phraseology he was using with the green quadrant and the specifically the way he uses Q leads me to believe, and we get into Q stuff later on, that the green quadrant, he feels like this is sort of in the same way that we would look at pre-colonial socialist projects.
Yeah.
That's what he feels like. He feels like mutualism is pre-cataclysmic cultural technology. That's sort of like the vibe I get. It's
you can tell me if I'm wrong, but basically this is like almost an Illuminati type conspiracy in a way, just not with the Illuminati the way that we generally think about it, right? Like he's considering it's the easy answer. What's wrong with the state of affairs of the world today? Oh, well, there's this group of elites and they control everything, and they've made all the systems, all the authoritarian systems, right? And they're controlling us. That's basically what it boils down to.
It's the idea that things are very complicated, that it's systems thinking, but black and white.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, right? He understands it's complicated and things don't really make sense until like, okay, but these groups are in opposition to each other, and he's like, aha, Hegelian. Aha, oh, a clash, you say. So what if this is just a ratchet effect? What if this is diabolical materialism, as he calls it? What if this is subterfuge? What if this is fake co-opted revolution put out as a limited hangout to as sort of a capitalist realist absorption of the thing, which would be your flaw, absorb it, and then put out a fake version of it to protect you, which is what he thinks, the communists did with socialism and, all that other stuff, and what, how the Nazism sort of rebranded itself as a victimized race. So they're able to mine social equity to do the same stuff Nazi Germany wanted to do, which I'm not even saying is wrong, and not them being a quote unquote created banker race, but there is a little bit of Holocaust equity being peddled to fucking sell the Israeli project. I mean, that is going on.
Like, what I was thinking when I was reading through all of this is why I hyper fixated on the Moses Hess claims, because it seemed like, which obviously I would say Nazism and Zionism have a lot in common, but communism doesn't have anything in common with either of those. So in my mind, it's like, okay, this guy is trying to find a way to connect the, quote unquote authoritarian axis together, right? To make this overarching conspiracy theory. And his only means of doing that is by using Moses Hess as the link. And I thought that was extremely malicious.
Yeah, well, or just a lazy mind. Who knows? I don't think that he's malevolent. I don't get that vibe from him. I think that he may be. I think that he's good-natured, but maybe he's not very smart. And
the reason why I took it as malicious was because in the live stream of his we were in the other night, he did say that, oh well, I've read Marx, I've read this, I've read that, but he obviously didn't read enough, and he doesn't understand the history, or else he would understand how anybody who knows a thing or two about this, who sees him, excuse me, connecting Moses Hess to Marx, to Zionism, to Nazism, to quote unquote state communism in such a manner, is going to call that out. It's ridiculous.
Well, okay, so let's talk about what he does believe. So it does seem that these are cobbled together. What do I have down here? So I do think that he went around and he cobbled together conspiracies about communism, a la like Judaism and bankers co-opting it, and that it's a co-opted movement to instill authoritarianism, which are all things he believes, right? Those are like 2 or 3 sort of like sub meta conspiracies about communism, right? He's stitched together with his conspiracies about like Judaism becoming a banker's dynasty, which he couples together with Zionism, Jesuits, and Freemasons, and all the alt-historical Tartarian stuff. He has coupled this together into a world group where it's all a con. It's a limited hangout. It's controlled opposition, and they're all friends behind closed doors. That kind of meme. That behind closed doors, Democrats and Republicans are smoking cigars and tinking glasses and cheering each other before doing that whole thing. And very much like you said, I do think that he is a conspiracy theorist who stumbled upon anarchism through a path of least resistance.
Absolutely.
He wants the progressive stuff. However, the conspiracy part of his brain will not differentiate between what he sees as malign state power and conspiratorial, right? So it's above and beyond a normal anarchist. He sees like who might see that so a normal anarchist, they would see these separate state structures as sort of like an innate thing of authoritarians natively doing their thing. This guy sees it, all authoritarians linked up as part of like a secret cabal of authoritarians doing it.
Yes, I would say that the majority of anarchists actually understand why Marxist-Leninists uphold authoritarianism. They just don't agree with it. They don't think that the communists are in bed with the Zionists and the fascists.
Some might.
Well, some do. I mean, some do. But I would, again, when I say anarchist, to be fair, I'm mostly considering anarcho-communists because the rest of them don't. I mean, none of them matter. But
yeah. And when they do liken sort of like horseshoe theory, liken like quote unquote authoritarian communism to fascism, they're not saying that they were created by the same people.
No, yeah, they're saying they're saying that they act the same,
right?
That in practice it's the same thing because
in effect it's the same thing. Yes, yeah. He also believes in phantom time hypothesis, but not the good phantom time hypothesis, which is like the 690 to 911 AD or whatever was made up. He thinks that 1,000 years didn't happen. So like the whole Middle Ages.
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, no, there's a second, it's not quite phantom time hypothesis, but it's the idea that 1,000 years were arbitrarily added to the calendar. It's sort of like the dumb guy's version of phantom time hypothesis that's not really based on anything historical, because there was a proposition, I believe, contemporaneous to like 690 where someone said, hey, what if we do this? And it didn't go anywhere. Right. Okay. But I think this one is sort of like the reason there is a dearth of understanding and technology and innovation and why we seemed at a standstill because of the Middle Ages. Why isn't there a lot of history to be told of? It's like, number one, who says there isn't? But number two is because they didn't happen. Right. So on top of believing that there was a cataclysm 3,200 years ago, of those 30, which I don't understand is, does he mean 3,200 years proper? Plus 1,000 years added on, so it was like 4,200 years ago, or it was actually 3,200 years ago with 1,000, and then the dating system is only 2,200 years ago. I don't know. I don't know what. Where's the 1,000?
When you told me he didn't believe in the Middle Ages, I'm like, wait, what the fuck?
The woman on his stream, who I'm guessing is his partner, maybe not. They're there.
His wife.
Is his wife?
Yes. I heard him refer to her as that.
Oh, that's cute. They also have a cat.
They're a great couple. I'll give them that. I'll give them credit.
Power couple.
Great couple.
Yeah. She also has, we're not going to get into her, but she also has, there's also other problematic stuff about him. He's claims to be indigenous, Cherokee and Powhatan. Is that what it is? Where's the anti-racialism stuff?
There's so much in here.
Claimed indigeneity of Powhatan. I don't know how to say that. And Cherokee. So he claims indigeneity, but he rejects phenotypes as inbreeding. And she claims to be a genealogist or a geneticist, and does research on genealogy. And she was like, there's a couple stitches of her stitching indigenous people. And like talking about whiteness and this and that, about like phenotypes or whatever. So it seems like they want to claim indigeneity, but also reject that race is a thing. But they are pro land back, which is interesting because I guess, well, he is pro Palestine again. So I don't know.
Well, he says so, right? But he's like, that doesn't make sense. You cannot be an anarchist and support Palestine when the main thing Palestine is fighting for right now is a state and a right to self-determination. Like they want a state and they want a seat at the UN. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which is another authoritarian Zionist, Jesuit, communist, fascist thing. They also used to believe zanier stuff. So apparently they went down a reptilian rabbit hole. I saw the wife's eyes kind of light up when I asked about the bells in Europe, which is kind of like a Tartarian thing, which is the idea that World War I or II were a pretext by which to go in and remove Tartarian evidence from Western Europe. And the bells were sort of that. But when I mentioned bells, he brought up reptilians. So I think that I don't know what bells and reptilians have to do with each other. That was kind of new. I've never seen those two things connected, but I think that maybe the bells are anti-reptilian.
Oh, all right. So we're learning.
I don't know what the bells have to do with the reptilians. I'm not quite sure. I know, like, so in my head, I pictured, you know how like Venom. Do you ever read like Spider-Man comics? So the Venom symbiote, right, was knocked off of Peter Parker by bells. Remember? Is it like a thing like that? Is it like a sonic attack against the reptilians to keep them at bay?
It's so weird.
Is it like lighting fires at night to keep the wolves away? I don't know what
who's to know?
I don't know.
We're gonna have to interview this guy.
I would like to interview this guy. So we think that he went around collecting conspiracy theories from anthropology, politics, histories, and cobbled them together. And that's why he seems to have more negative beliefs, right? Or he has dispositive beliefs about things and not positive, right? So if you take a skeptic who understands like economics, right, but doesn't trust anyone, you get an anarchist, right? Like I would say so, yeah. This is a cynical application of politics. He doesn't have earnest positive belief or no revolutionary optimism. He doesn't really have that positive beliefs. He knows what he doesn't like, but he can't really say what he likes. And in as much as he knows that like capitalism is a sham and the big bankers and the corrosive effects of capitalism, his only solution to it is like, well, we can do some sort of like mutualism, right? But yes, he can't extend that trust to systems.
That's this is something we see with a lot of anarchists. They're very good at talking about tearing stuff down and criticizing what they don't like, but they don't really have a great idea of what we can do going forward and how we can change it.
Or their anti-authoritarian framework prevents them from using the correct solution.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so let's talk real quick about the ratchet effect. We know the Democrat-Republican ratchet effect. This guy in his book, which it has Bakunin on the cover, which I think we covered the Bakunin anti-Semitism, right?
I think we did, yeah.
Yeah, the ratchet effect and the creation of the American politics. However, his ratchet effect, which is normally applied to Democrat and Republicans, he applies to communism and fascism and Zionism as parts of a mechanism that get us into totalitarian control systems, right? What he calls diabolical materialism, right? Are you familiar with David Icke at all?
I am, yeah.
The English guy, a bunch of weird stuff about him, but basically he used to believe in reptilians, and now he's sort of a new age conspiracist, whatever. But he popularized the Hegelian dialectic as a control structure, right? The problem reaction solution, which is not the Hegelian dialectic.
No, yeah, but I don't think they don't understand the Hegel. I don't even understand it.
Tell me, explain to us all right now in terms. Explain to me like I'm 5. What is the Hegelian dialectic?
Well, if you see, the thing is for years I have been attempting to tackle Hegel's works myself, Phenomenology of the Spirit, The Science of Logic, and I'll tell you that every time I pick up one of those books, I would talk in depth about the Hegelian dialectic. I don't understand Hegel enough to confidently talk about it. Hegel has been something that, like I said, I've been trying to tackle for years at this point. But I don't know if it would suffice to say that the Hegelian dialectic is not all too different from the dialectics we learn about in Marxism, but Marx applied the dialectic to material reality, right? Hegel's was like a sort of a thought system about how ideas arise and come into conflict with each other and so on and so forth.
Which is like generations of history type thing?
Yeah. Hegel is the thing is I don't think Hegel's logic or philosophy is necessarily hard to understand. I think that the way Hegel writes is fucking annoying.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But,
But it's definitely not problem, reaction, solution.
So, like, I think that if we are attempting to systematize it, some people do explain it like that. There's a thesis and antithesis, and the two essentially, I guess I wouldn't say battle it out, right?
So we have him sort of incorrectly applying the David Ickean problem, reaction, solution. What he calls diabolical materialism, he says that whatever the elites can control, they will control, which I think is not necessarily the power mongers. What they can control, they will try to, right? I think that is pretty fair.
Well, I would say, yeah, and the capitalists, they already do that.
Right. So, I mean, I don't think that's wrong, but again, he's sort of ascribing a sort of Jesuitical Zionist Illuminati that,
yes, absolutely.
And therefore any sort of like group that has a name is co-opted, right? Because except the Green Party, I guess, which is weird because he also doesn't like Jill Stein. I don't know what's going on with this guy.
His whole thing is about bringing the Green Party back to its roots, as I've seen him say.
Oh, okay. I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's like a reformist two ways.
Yeah, I would assume in his mind the Green Party has also been hijacked by Zionists.
Yeah, he similarly does not like Jill Stein, and I think he calls her like co-opted as well. He sees Freemasonry as what's a marked difference is he seems like a sort of like esoteric variety because of his Tartarian stuff. He thinks that Freemasonry is sort of like a bridge from the old world into the new. Whereas once it was a bastion of sacred symbolism and like mystical knowledge, he sees it gutted to serve a purpose to bridge the system from Jesuit rule to Christian nationalists, racial theorists, finance dynasties, and proto-Zionist factions. So basically, Freemasonry is sort of like a boys' club through which they can also enact this, but I don't see how that was done, except that he seems to just be glomming on to the idea that Freemasons run stuff. Right? This is what I'm saying. Like, in which way does Freemasonry interface with Zionism and Christian nationalists? In which way does it do that? Except maybe Albert Pike, the Confederate general, right? Was high up in York Rite Freemasonry. And he wrote so maybe that's the link there between like Christian nationalism, and I'm not really sure, but he seems to be once and again he throws Freemasonry into the mix because there's overarching religio-political conspiracies about it. So he throws that in there, but he doesn't want to speak that negatively about it because he sees it unlike like religious Judaism, which he may not really believe in. I think he does believe in some hermetic stuff, I'm guessing, which is why he doesn't want to denounce Freemasonry proper, because he treats that much differently than he would like communism or Zionism or something.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know enough about Freemasonry or how it could be connected. I'm surprised he doesn't try and make a link between Freemasonry and all of this with Moses Hess, since it seems like a figure he loves quite a bit. But
was Moses Hess a Freemason?
No, probably not. But
okay.
It's not uncommon to see people call Marx a Freemason, Lenin a Freemason. There's actually they're not substantiated by anything, but I've seen a lot of arguments over the years of people claiming that communism was an invention of Freemasonry.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things. So then we get to his Tartarian alt history, and this is what I've been able to glean from just like listening to one of his lives. There was a cataclysm 3,200 years ago, 450 Europeans. There was 1,400 to 1,700 survivors worldwide, and that the Vikings were former sort of like diminished Tartarian nations fighting against the Jesuits. So he saw Jesuit family dynasties and Vikings duking it out. So I guess he's sort of like imagining England in the Viking waves of Viking invasions. He sees the world kind of like Jesuits versus everybody, which is very Christian evangelical conspiratorial. And then it's a very interesting thing he said here is that Islam is as close as we get to the Q knowledge, which I'm inferring that he means as sort of pre-cataclysm knowledge. And there's, do you know about the Q source for the Gospels?
No, I was going to ask you what exactly that all was about earlier.
So there's this idea with the Gospels. I believe it's Mark is the stated. They can tell that 2 of the Gospels are written after Mark because they interpolate things that he said and sort of add narrative around it, right? So they know that Mark came first, and the other 2 were referencing that. Or 2 of them were direct, implemented what Mark wrote. And then there's also, but they also, in doing like text analysis, they showed that they both share components of a unspecified document, and that is called the Q document. It's an unknown document. It's an unknown letter or gospel or some religious text that 2 of the Gospels also inherit from. So it's this idea of, it's sort of like a Dead Sea Scrolls thing. It's this idea that there is other apocrypha out there. We don't have the full story now. It's been edited. It's sort of like the Nicene Council or like the Ethiopian Bible or like the Coptic Christians have apostles or books of the Bible that we don't have. It's the idea that we have cherry-picked sanitized or nerfed religiosity, and that there is greater bandwidth of religious truth out there somewhere. It's sort of kind of like, like Ovid, the 4 Ages of Man.
I have no, I don't know what that is.
Okay, so like it's kind of like Lord of the Ring. Lord of the Ring, back in the day, things were beautiful and magical, and now when you go and look at The Hobbit, it's in decline. Castles are ruined. The orcs are taking over. Evil is in charge of the world, whereas before it was magical and unicorns. It's sort of like that type of thing. We used to have a full Bible and full understanding of what it meant to, believe in God and all of that. And now we have a diminished, politicized, controlled version of it.
I see. Yeah, I get you.
It's kind of like that. So for him, linking up with his, race science is fake. Genealogy is fake. All phenotypical differences are from inbreeding. These groups, races weren't races. There were family dynasties, and these family dynasties were the hidden players behind our modern political structures of communism and Zionism and Christian nationalism, whatever. Those are just competing families duking it out. And right now we have the Zio-Nazis in ascendancy. So it's like low key a little bit like Zoggy. It's like anti-Israeli Zoggy type thing going on. There's also like this other codex, which is like the Quill source or something. It doesn't matter. So he's very much into alt science. But to cycle back, did you want to talk about? You wrote a lot about Moses Hess.
Yeah. We could. I'll touch on it really quick. I don't know how long we've been going for, so I'll try and keep it somewhat short.
And the reason that we're talking about this, to read a quote from his thing, he seems to bring up Moses Hess a lot, and he's a central figure he's a linchpin figure in his conspiracism. As you can see, I tried to read the Crimson Con. I stopped very quickly. I got very bored of it.
Yeah, me too.
But there was a quote at the beginning that said, quote, "The forgotten architect of Zionism, the secret father of Nazism, the co-creator of state communism, the man who took Judaism and gutted it, turned it from a religion of law and exile into a bloodline caste system of chosen colonizers, and what he calls a banker race," which it just seems so fucking, it just seems such a like a noxious thing to call people, a banker race. It's very much like orc or like the goblins in Harry Potter or something. I don't know.
Yeah, so in his live, he kept referencing Moses Hess too, and then obviously that what you just quoted puts it very very clear. But the way that he kind of made it out was that Marx was merely a pawn of Moses Hess, carrying out what Moses Hess wanted. Now, Moses Hess was a what was called a true socialist or a philosophical socialist. He was a German socialist, basically a utopian, and him and Marx collaborated for some time. In fact, it was Moses Hess who, at least from what I've read, encouraged Engels to start getting into communism. So they knew him and they were friends with him, and they worked together on stuff. But what ended up happening was the two had a falling out. And it was about 2 years before the Communist Manifesto was published. And the reason why they had a falling out was because of Hess's utopianism. They critiqued his what was a tendency of basing his views on abstract ideas of man rather than like class struggle. To Marx, Moses Hess was divorced from the working class.
I don't know shit about Moses Hess. He seems like not an integral figure in as much as I could tell from anybody who's like currently identifies as a communist. Nobody references Moses Hess for anything.
Because he wasn't.
Is there anything to the claim of him being the architect of Zionism and secret father of Nazism? Is there anything that was glaring? Did you look into those claims at all? I don't know.
All right. So, yeah, 20 years after the manifesto was even published, Moses Hess started to kind of drift from his utopian socialism into proto-Zionism. He was a Jewish nationalist at that point, and he is held up in the canon of Zionism. He was literally buried in Israel. So there is a kernel of truth to that. He is one of the early pioneers of the Zionist movement.
Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, so I mean, we have a proto-communist, of sorts, right?
Yes, there is a kernel of truth in that. For the Nazism thing, I couldn't find anything like substantial. I wouldn't like the Nazis might have borrowed some ideas from Hess, but you know what I mean. It wasn't. I wouldn't call him like the architect of like Nazism or anything.
It's interesting. So did he write about like blood and soil or something, and then they like liked it and took it or something? I don't know.
In one of his books, he did. In his later years, it was about it was a Zionist book, right? All I'm trying to say is that his critiquing of Marx through critiquing Hess is like extremely bad faith, because Marx despised Hess. The fact of the matter is that Marx does not equal Hess. To critique Marx through Hess is extremely bad faith. Marx was not a Zionist. He made this very clear. If we look at his works on the Jewish question, he considered the idea of a Jewish nationality as chimerical. And then last but not least, the idea that Hess, because I heard this guy say Hess wrote the Communist Manifesto. Not true. Hess didn't feed anything to Marx. Marx took practical ideas from all utopian socialists and utilized them where he could. But Hess had nothing to do with the Communist Manifesto. What Hess did have to do with was writing up a draft on a confession of communist faith to be submitted for the League of the Just. And what they did was they heard what Hess had to say, and they said, no, we're not going to go with that. That's bullshit. Hey, Engels, can you draft this up instead? And Engels drafted it up, and it's what we know today as the Principles of Communism.
It's very interesting about that something Hess wrote late in one of his later books apparently inspired Nazism. Something like Blood and Soil or whatever. I think he considered
the Jewish people to be pure or something like that. I haven't read it myself.
Well, which is why, it is interesting because the Nazis do consider themselves like the chosen people, right? Yes. So like there is that link, but it could be something as simple as like plagiarism. You know, how like the critique of like Napoleon III somehow got transmutated into the critique of the liberalism instilled by Napoleon III by two plagiaristic proxies became the protocol of the learned elders of Zion. You know, what I mean? It could just be a historical plagiarism or something. I don't know.
Before we finish this up, I should mention I did see JWeeds saying that the protocols of the elders of Zion is true. By the way,
wait, really?
Yeah, and his wife on her Medium, they both have Medium accounts where they write articles. She's got a whole thing about like Bakunin's anti-Semitism was actually just telling the future.
Oh, shit. Why isn't that in the show notes? That's crazy. Yeah, that just,
Yeah, I should have put that in here.
yeah, I didn't even realize that they were just outright anti-Semites. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, fuck this guy. But anyways, I would still like to interview him. All right, we had a cavalcade of. If you guys notice any weird audio stuff, I'm sorry about that. We'll try to figure out. Cappy, that's it. Fuck this guy. Is there anything else you want to tell these people?
No, yeah, fuck technology. I'm Ann Prim now.
Yeah, we're going full Uncle Ted. Online Leftist, patreon.com/online leftist. We do 2 live streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Hit the link tree to get in the Online Leftist Discord, which is the Red Army Capybara Discord. Get up in there, and then we will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.